Oh man, the season must be coming up. 2 episodes in 1 week of the Sprint Ride Option podcast. I am Andrew Pasquini. I have Jason Aponte to my right. Just saw some news on Twitter. We'll talk about later, Jason. That Blue Wire Hustle. I just totally got thrown off by what I just saw, but that's okay. Jason, we're here to talk a little 49ers secondary today. This is our positional breakdown that we're doing, where we're picking it up from where we left off last week. We covered the running backs. We're going to do cornerbacks this week. We really don't have an order we're really planning to go in. All we know is we're saving quarterbacks for last. So if you're saying, wow, how'd you guys go from running backs to defensive backs? We literally let somebody in the chat last week pick what we're talking about this week. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm glad that we stuck to the bit. For the audio listeners won't be able to see, I am wearing a Russell Westbrook Oklahoma City jersey, and Andrew Pasquini to my left is wearing a Kevin Durant 35, Oklahoma City jersey. Yes. So we stuck to the bit, and it worked. And Andrew kind of yelled at me before when I didn't show up with the jersey on, and he was like, "What are you doing?"
Because, you posted a picture wearing a Russell Westbrook jersey who, I don't like Russell Westbrook, so I just wanted to make fun of you. I just wanted to make fun of you for it. And I'm like, you better wear that for the stream because I know what I'm going to wear. And I'm wearing the jersey of the actual player Oklahoma City should celebrate, but they don't because his contract expired and he picked a different team. So I just wanted to put my love out there for Kevin Durant. That's really all. One of my favorite players.
I wanted to put my love out there for a $17 jersey that I bought because it's literally one of the wisest purchases I've ever made in my life. This is a Nike jersey, and it feels great, and it looks good. So, and to be fair, the blue Oklahoma City jersey, the one that I'm wearing, is really dope. It really is dope, honestly. When you wear it and the aesthetic and the way that it looks, I'm wearing them with sweatshorts and my white Air Forces. They look good, man. The drip is preserved when you wear the blue Oklahoma City jersey.
That might be the first ever time anybody in history has said the Oklahoma City jerseys look good with anything, because they're maybe they might be the most boring uniforms in sports right now, to be honest. Oklahoma City's.
The blue one looks nice. I mean, and the white one does too as well. It's just the blue one is, it's got the Nike logo. You've got the Adidas on there. It's on brand for both of us, honestly.
Yeah, no, Kevin Durant. I loved him since his days at Texas. Goes to the Sonics, goes to the Thunder. I guess he didn't go to the Thunder. And then he goes to the Warriors, and that's when I really started liking him. Jay. So as I said, we're going to be here talking about defensive backs. I wanted to yell for a second. I know I don't yell too often on this show, but I felt like the timing of a news report that came out yesterday was mighty interesting, right?
Go off, King. It's usually me that is all red in the face and everything as well, too. So I would like to get fired up, Andrew Pasquini here. Yeah. So I'm all ears.
And I'm gonna regret this. I honestly am gonna regret this, that I'm stooping to this point, because we talk about it on this show, like not talking about this stuff. So we had Drea Blackwell on Wednesday. If you were here, we love her. She's the best.
Amazing episode.
Amazing episode. Go download, listen, undownload, re-download, re-listen. Get those numbers. Got to help us out. But we talked about, Twitter. We like to keep our finger on the pulse of 49ers Twitter, and we talked to her about these, these fake conversations we create about Jimmy Garoppolo versus Trey Lance. It's more so coming from the anti-Jimmy Garoppolo side. There's a large contingent, not a large, but there's a loud contingent on Twitter that thinks like Trey Lance is week 1 starter no matter what happens. And nothing's really happened to prove that point. And so yesterday, news comes out that Tom Brady played the entire season last year with at first a partially torn MCL. And then Ian Rappaport tweeted, it was a fully torn MCL, which more severe. And it's a tweet that has nothing to do with the San Francisco 49ers. Has nothing to do with the San Francisco 49ers. And I saw a couple of tweets on my timeline. I'm sure other people saw tweets on their timeline. I'm not going to name names because I don't think these tweets deserve the recognition, but I'm going to mention them just because it's kind of the point we were making with Drea, that these people are creating a conversation that doesn't need to exist. One of my tweets I saw was, but a quarterback can't play on a hurt ... Never mind. And then another one, wait, Brady won a Super Bowl with a fully torn MCL, but Jimmy can't play on a boo-boo ankle, which is referencing another tweet that happened during the season. So I did some light Googling, just some light Googling. I don't like to Google things too deep because then you get into corners of the internet that you don't want to get into. And I looked up MCL tears and see how long they can take to recover. A grade 1 MCL tear can take a few days to a week. Okay, so that's not that severe, whatever. A grade 2 can take 2 to 4 weeks to heal. A grade 3 tear, which is what Brady had, takes 4 to 8 weeks to heal. So 2 months at the most, which I'm not trying to question how severe the injury was for Tom Brady.
Or how tough he is.
And how, that's not what this is about. That's not what any of this is not about Tom Brady. And so I thought I looked up how long it can take a high ankle sprain, which is what Jimmy Garoppolo had. And I saw it could take anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months. So already we're talking about an MCL injury, which takes anywhere from a few days to 8 weeks to recover. Comparing it to a 3-month injury, which is what Jimmy Garoppolo had. It kept him out for 3 months, correct? Like he missed majority of the season. So I'm already upset about that because we're doing the narrative thing of Jimmy Garoppolo can't play on the field. He's hurt, which he is, which is fair. But to compare these injuries is wild to me. And then I dug a little deeper, right, into the Tom Brady injury just to make sure, hey, maybe I'm just being crazy. Maybe it was severe. And I looked into it. The report came out that Tom Brady tore his MCL with the Patriots. So this is an injury that happened in 2019. It wasn't severe enough for him to, get surgery after the Patriots season. It wasn't severe enough for the Buccaneers, a team trying to sign Tom Brady, for their physician, their physical to come back and say, no, we can't sign this guy because of this torn MCL. He was obviously able to play at a very high degree because he won a damn Super Bowl, right? He won a Super Bowl. And then he was able to wait after the season to get this surgery. Listen, I understand. If you want to question Jimmy Garoppolo's toughness, that's not my thing because I am not here. I'm a man who last week went on a walk and rolled his ankle stepping off a curb wrong. And I thought I broke my ankle and I stood there for 10 minutes just I don't know if I can put weight on this. I'm not going to question how tough Jimmy Garoppolo is. I'm not even going to question how tough Tom Brady is. But my point I'm making is, oh my God, not everything has to be about Jimmy Garoppolo. Not everything has to be about the San Francisco 49ers. Tom Brady played on a torn MCL last year, which I know we get scared with the CLs. It's not the ACL. This is not even at its worst. I mean, I guess at its worst, an MCL leads into an ACL injury, which is a big issue. Obviously, this didn't lead to an ACL injury because Tom Brady played last year, right, Jason? The MCL injury obviously wasn't serious enough for him to get surgery after it happened in 2019, B, the Buccaneers to back out of a deal because of a torn MCL, and C, it wasn't serious enough for him to miss any games last year. So just stop. I'm tired, right? I'm tired of this. And I know I'm complaining about 2 tweets and I know there's way more. It's just what I saw in my timeline. But this is why Jason and I intentionally have not talked about the Trey Lance versus Jimmy Garoppolo thing since the draft, because nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We're not going to create storylines just to have something to talk about. We're going to be the guys who are going to get creative and talk about things that we think are interesting and not rehashing the same conversation. So just stop making everything about Jimmy Garoppolo and what he does on a field. And just in general, if you're on Twitter and you're not in the NFL, maybe just not question a player's toughness in general. Yeah. Thank you for my TED Talk.
Yeah, and you know what? If that's yelling, that's probably at a 2 for you, because I feel like I've gotten way more fired up over stupider things. You're just way better at controlling your emotions. But as soon as I saw that come out, the first thought was, okay, I'm closing this app because I know exactly what's coming next. Oh, man, Jimmy can't play on an ankle. And dude, it does not matter. Who cares at this point? Look, anybody who is worried about this quarterback situation, you need to know 2 things. One, the situation is going to handle itself one way or another, okay? The Trey Lance trade wasn't for a backup. It was for the starter. So whatever. If it happens this year, if it happens next year, that's fine. It'll play out in the same way. And Andrew's right. I'm tired of people rehashing the same argument with no new information. At least let us get one camp practice in where I can see with my eyes what happens. And then, you know what? If I pull up on the stream after we're at camp and I say, hey, Trey looks better than Jimmy, cool. But right now, on July 16th, with no sort of new information, with people running with narratives about, well, why doesn't Jimmy post more workout videos? Jimmy has never posted workout videos. Why would he change now?
I've never posted workout videos either.
Me neither. And when I did, I got roasted on the internet for it. So, I mean, the thing is this, if you want Jimmy Garoppolo to post workout videos, that rings hollow to me. You know why? Yeah. Because it's happening and it's never happened before.
Yeah.
He's not from the same social media era that these kids are. And if you want to post your workout videos, go ahead. But for you to say, oh, man, Jimmy's not posting workout videos, look at Trey, that's a stupid thing to say because that's never been his MO. Yeah. And why would he start now? That would ring hollow. I would look at that and say, man, he's really trying hard at this point. I understand that there's not much to talk about. But goodness gracious, there's so many things to go into training camp that deserve attention that it's not just this. This is the most important thing, clearly, the Trey versus Jimmy discussion. But it's not the only thing. Doesn't anybody want to see the progression of Javon Kinlaw? Doesn't anybody want to see who's going to be the wide receiver 3 on his team? Does anybody want to see how Samson Ebukam is working? I'm thinking off of the top of my head. Does anybody want to see Mike McGlinchey's progression or Aaron Banks starting? There's so many things to talk about. I'm tired as well, Andrew, and now you're getting me fired up. I'm tired of it, and I will not be on a podcast that will make up things and use and rehash the same argument week after week and repackage it in different ways. It will not happen.
No. And even too, I'm not going to go out last second sports about this because I could spin it the other way because he says, hey, I have two talar, I don't know that word, I'm sorry, dome fractures, which are broken ankles and a torn meniscus. I still hoop and play flag football. I know it's not NFL ball, but I do it for free and Jimmy won't play for 27. That's the Niners protecting an investment, right? There's this narrative that Jimmy chose not to play last year, which I don't believe at all. Yes, you could, if you want to make that argument that he wouldn't play for 27 million, sure, go ahead. You can choose that to be your narrative, but you also got to look at the other side that the Niners made a $27 million investment into Jimmy Garoppolo. They're not going to risk it. They're not going to risk it on an injury like a high ankle sprain, especially if we saw how bad it looked in Seattle. He obviously re-aggravated it. It's just to me, man, it is what it is. We don't need to, as I said, we don't need to I'm kind of doing what I'm saying we shouldn't do by rehashing this conversation and giving it the light. I guess it's more so to give more of a reason as to why Jason and I don't talk about Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo every episode, because nothing's changed. And as we said with Drea, nothing will change. And Jason, we're gonna do that right now. We're gonna talk about defensive backs. We're gonna look at the 49ers defensive backfield. And we're going to talk about it. And Jason has plenty of thoughts because, as you know, Jason's a big watch the tape guy. I'm not as knowledgeable watching tape as Jason is, especially when it comes to the secondary. So my feedback's going to be base knowledge. Jason is the guy you want to listen to talk about this. So before we let Jason cook a little bit, let me tell you the names the 49ers currently have.
Go for it.
The names you may know, obviously Jason Verrett, Emmanuel Mosley, K'Wan Williams, Jimmy Ward, Jaquaski Tart, Tarvarius Moore, Dante Johnson, Tim Harris, and Ken Webster. Those are the names you may know.
Dante Johnson.
Did I jump over Dante Johnson? I apologize.
Nope.
I have Dante Johnson written here. I just jumped over it. And the new names, Diamador Lenore, he drafted. Tony Jefferson, they just brought him in. Tavon Wilson. Kai, I should have wrote a pronunciation guide next to it. Kai Nakua, I'm just running with that. I apologize if that's incorrect. Mark Fields, Jared Maiden, and Talanoa Hafanga. And Jason, I think this is really the best place to start. We'll start here. Very much like the wide receiver core, It's a good starting group, right? It's a very good starting group. The starting five is gonna be Verrett, Mosley, K1, Ward, and Tart in the safeties. Unfortunately, it's one injury away from not looking as good. So what's your thoughts just on the depth, and then we can kind of look at specific guys.
No, and you're absolutely right. And that's been a concern with me about, hey, look, I understand what they see in Lenore. I understand what they see in Ambry Thomas. But unfortunately, I'm a big track record guy, okay? And I'm not big at projecting what a player can do. And you're right, God forbid, an injury to Jason Verrett or Emmanuel Mosley. And now you are hoping that this player that is stepping in will be able to handle it. Not that I'm saying that they won't. It's just how can you predict that they will? And that's really the cornerback depth is something that I've been concerned with. Steven Nelson is sitting out there at home. But it feels like the 49ers are going to go into this camp with who they have, see what they have, and then if need be, if things become that dire, then maybe call around to other players. And that's smart. And Eric Crocker told me that. Hey, you may look at Steven Nelson as a guy who, was on the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, one of the top defenses in the league, and he's not signed. But that doesn't mean that he won't be signed. And it doesn't mean that he won't be picked up once teams figure out what they have. So let's just start with the starters. Let's start with Jason Verrett. Here's the stat. And here's something that, look, we all know that Jason Verrett's amazing. We love the story. We love what he did last year. But here's the stat. Here it is. The first 4 weeks that he played, because he didn't play the first 4 games. The first 4 weeks, he started in week 3 against the New York Giants. He allowed 9 yards receiving in his first game back in a long time. And it was the game that he played before this was the Pittsburgh game in 2019, in which unfortunately he got put in a bad spot and Deontay Johnson went over the top of him. So I'm not even going to blame him for that. He just wasn't ready at that point, and then eventually wound up, losing his season. So 9 yards on 2 completions in his first game against the Giants. What I really enjoyed when I was watching the tape was I watched a guy who was confident, who, when they threw screens to Golden Tate, to Darius Slayton, he immediately broke on the ball and was tackling. And it looked like a guy who was completely over his injury, right? 9 yards the first game. Philly is the next game. 9 yards on 1 completion. 9 yards. So that we're talking about 18 total yards in 2 games from a cornerback who hasn't played football in a very long time. Let's keep going. The Miami game. That's obviously a game that's a black mark on the 2020 season. And Brian Allen is going to bear a lot of that brunt, even though I feel horrible for the guy. He shouldn't have been in that position. Yeah, but, it just is what it is. 6 yards in that game. 6. So now we're at a grand total of 24 yards in his first 3 games. Yeah, it is pretty good math. And then what I felt was the Jason Verrett coming out party was the Rams game on Sunday Night Football. 6 targets, 1 completion, 1 interception, 4 yards. So for the people scoring at home, that is a total of 28 yards in the first 4 games for Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett is like that, as the kids would say. And like that, built different, whatever, however you want to use, okay? So look, let's go through the rough patches, right? Let's say the rough patches. 42 yards against the New England Patriots, 53 against Seattle, 60 against Green Bay, which one of those touchdowns,
I'm not even ready, right?
No, I'm not even ready to blame him for it. So the first touchdown that he gave up was a red zone touchdown where it was literally a scramble drill and Aaron Rodgers and MVS were on the same page, and it was just there was nothing Jason Verrett could do. All right, as a defensive back, there was nothing more that he could do. But PFF, unfortunately, in one of their metrics, graded him with a second touchdown, which was nowhere near his fault. When you watch it on film, it's a cover 3 zone. Jason Verrett drops into his spot, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling runs right past Marcel Harris, and they throw a touchdown. They attributed that touchdown to Jason Verrett. So I'm not trying to take a dump on PFF, but those metrics are flawed when you come to those things. So 60 yards against them, but look, 21 against the oh my goodness gracious, the Saints. Right? New Orleans, 37 again against the Rams. Look, 127 against the Bills. Okay, Everyone had a tough game that game. And also, I also want to remind people that Stephon Diggs is also like that. He's very much like that. and he was literally one of the best receivers last year. So I'm not going to kill him totally for that. There were many defensive breakdowns in that game where guys were caught off of coverage. And if you go back and you watch, even the person who doesn't understand defensive schemes or coverages or anything like that can see guys out of position. You can see it, though. But that's my point, right? Like, we can all watch the film and say, you don't need to be a genius to point out, man, that guy blew it right there. Man, this guy should have been there, right? Those things. But here's what I wanted to point out. The last 3 weeks, Terry McLaurin is a Washington football team wide receiver who's amazing. Arizona obviously has DeAndre Hopkins. Seattle has DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. This is how Jason Verrett finished his last 3 games out. 21 yards against the Washington football team with an interception. 33 yards. And those 33 yards were all accumulated basically by DeAndre Hopkins. He had like 7 catches for like 42 yards. That's 6 a catch. That's really bad. Yeah. That's really bad. Even if you were a running back, that's really bad.
Well, I mean, okay? I guess that's what happens when your head coach just calls slant routes all the time.
Or 3 yards outs and things like that. No, Verrett put the clamps. So here's the difference, right? And we're going to get into the other starting cornerback because this is where I kind of want to end it. And then obviously 32 yards in Seattle, that was nothing big. But let's move over to Mosley, okay? Mm-hmm. Because week 1, unfortunately, last year, the 49ers had an awful game plan in stopping DeAndre Hopkins. It was literally stand 12, 13, 14 yards away from DeAndre Hopkins and allow him to run whatever route.
Yeah, the strategy to stop DeAndre Hopkins was just to not stop DeAndre Hopkins.
It was almost like the game plan when you went through the walkthroughs. They were like, DeAndre Hopkins, meh. They treated DeAndre Hopkins like he was Christian Kirk. That's the best way I could put it. Yeah. So look, Emmanuel Mosley is Pro Football Reference has given him 10 completions for 94 yards. And I'm pretty sure that it's a little bit more than that. Yeah. If you really wanted to break it down, because again, you don't know who's going to be attributing what to what. Okay. Mm-hmm. The Jets, 1 completion, 7 yards. The Giants, he didn't get targeted. He didn't play much in that game. The Rams, 4 completions, 64 yards. The Patriots game, 1 completion, 11 yards. The Seattle game is a little bit skewed. He gave up 133 yards, but I believe that a lot of that has to do with 1 or 2 big plays where guys missed tackles, and he just happened to be in coverage at that point. Mm-hmm. So I'm not here to kill Emmanuel Mosley in any way, right? 133 yards, 53 yards, and many of them were on 1 play. Look, there are not that many cornerbacks, including Jalen Ramsey, who can cover Devontae Adams. Poor Emmanuel Mosley was stuck out there on the island. Aaron Rodgers took advantage, and he threw, 53 yards and a tutty. That's it. After that, the Saints game, 3 yards, 46 yards against the Rams, 9 against Dallas. That's it. So Emmanuel Mosley actually shaped up to be very, very solid. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I really want to push, okay? So Jason Verrett, I still feel, has another level to unlock. Mm-hmm. Seriously. He can seriously unlock another level where he can be, like I said, if he plays all 17 games, he can be an all-pro. That is in his range of outcomes, and it's more likely than anything. Emmanuel Mosley is a very solid number 2 guy, and the stats and the film bear that out. So remember week 17 of 2019? I don't want to pick on Ahkello Witherspoon. Ahkello Witherspoon gets pulled. Emmanuel Mosley gets put in to a dire situation.
The most dire of situations.
Right. And he sat there and he actually made plays when his number was called. And the same thing happened in the divisional round that year. If you remember, Ahkello was out there. 1 touchdown to Stephon Diggs. Yep. Yeah. Diggs scores a touchdown and Mosley comes in. Mosley is a lot better than people are giving credit to. And he is a very solid number 2. So when it comes to those guys, 1 and 2, I feel safe. The problem becomes after that. Mm-hmm. Okay. K1's going to be in the slot. We know that. And they also have somebody, Lenore, who can play the slot with him. And that's fine. I don't think he can do what K1 does because I feel like K1 is still severely underrated. But at the same time, if either one of these guys goes down, things become hairy. They become very hairy for this secondary, at least the cornerback room. Because the safety room, I feel like
safety's fine.
They're solid, even with the Tarvarius Moore injury, unfortunately. I was really excited to see what he was going to do in a contract year, but give me Ward, Tart, Marcel Harris, Hufanga, and also with the way that the 49ers play defense, it's almost positionless. So guys don't need to be in their spot. But again, I would love to see one more solid name in this cornerback room. Just one more. And if that's Steven Nelson and he takes Emmanuel Mosley's spot, that's fine, because Emmanuel Mosley is the best backup cornerback probably in football. One of them. and that's a good problem to have. But I'm a big, big believer in track record. What do I know over what can I predict? And we'll talk a little bit more about the guys that are, that were drafted, Lenore, Ambry Thomas. But I feel like this secondary of Ward, Tart, Verrett, and Mosley, that's formidable. It is, bearing no injuries. That's the problem. And that's really where you get nervous. You have to wonder if Jason Verrett's season was the exception or the rule.
Mm-hmm. And real quick too, I went through the Niners roster, missed Marcel Harris. So I want to apologize to Marcel Harris. And I also missed Ambry Thomas. Didn't list them at the top. I went through the Niners roster real quick before the show, missed both of them. Apologize. Didn't mean to. Jason, there's a reason Jason Verrett was upper half of the first round draft pick, right? Like he has the skills to be a top tier defensive back. Unfortunately, injuries had other plans. But we saw what he can be, last year when he was fully healthy. My little fun fact I wrote down, he went to Santa Rosa Junior College, which is also known as DBU. DBU, according to the Sprint Ride Option podcast. So, obviously he has that history. And then Emmanuel Mosley, as I said, last week, for those of you who didn't watch the running back one, I try to have fun facts about these players. Emmanuel Mosley in high school, he was a two-way starter. He played quarterback and cornerback. His senior year, he led his team to a 15-0 record, won a state title, threw for 1,300 yards, rushed for 1,400 yards, 47 total offensive touchdowns. So in case the Niners need an emergency quarterback next year, there you go. And obviously we're not going to dive into it. But something I touched on earlier in the offseason is, hey man, Niners need one more secondary guy, rotational piece, veteran guy. I think you know the name I'm alluding to.
No, but what? They let Akello Weatherspoon walk.
They also let Akello Weatherspoon walk. So like things like that. It's maybe they feel better. Maybe there's somebody we don't know yet. That they feel really good about, which is why they haven't gone out and brought Akello Weatherspoon, or obviously made more of an effort for Richard Sherman, which obviously is a little more of a situation right now. So maybe there is something there, because the starting is this secondary, if we take every team's top three corners, because let's just assume the base is three receivers, you get your slot corner, and you take the safeties, Ward and Tart, you would take this group against a lot of other teams, especially the safeties, right? We talked about it with Jaquaski when he was on the pod. We tried to get him to say, best safety duo. That's something that we believe in. That's not just something we tried to get him to say, which we would never do. It's something we believed. We firmly believe that Ward and Tart can be one of the top duos in the league. And if you add the top three corners with Verrett, Mosley, and Williams, that's a secondary that not a lot of teams want to see. And then you throw in a position group we're going to talk about later, the pass rush, getting Nick Bosa back and kicking Armstead to the inside, and D Ford might be coming back, and Ekubam we talked about. So now all of a sudden this is a very formidable secondary if you throw in the pass rush aspect of the secondary, which is something a big part of why 2019 was successful. The secondary wasn't great in 18. The Niners largely ignored it. They got a pass rush, and all of a sudden the secondary got really good. Last year, the pass rush has a few key injuries. The secondaries, give or take, because they also had a few injuries there too. So obviously, assuming health, the secondary should be fine. Jason, let's talk about some of the depth pieces. Let's get to the safeties, because you haven't mentioned Ward and Tart. Let's talk about the safeties before we get into the depth.
Jimmy Ward and Jaquaski Tart are the most underrated, not spoken about players in this league. Forget the 49ers fan base, right? Because Jimmy Ward has seen a transformation in terms of how 49er fans look at him. Okay. And this has a lot to do with his bravado and the way that he's played and the way. So I've been banging the drum for so long about Jimmy Ward. You guys really don't understand the flexibility that he allows this team. He can play slot corner. He can play safety. He can play in the box. He can play single high. Like there's nothing Jimmy Ward can't do. And now that you've seen Jimmy Ward kind of the last few weeks be a little bit more vocal in the way that he goes about, shout out to Grant Cohn. That interview was incredible. Honestly, the Jimmy Ward, incredible. And that confidence is coming through in the way that he is talking because he's healthy, right? And I've made a prediction. If Jaquiski Tartt plays 17 games, he's going to make a Pro Bowl. I don't think you guys understand, and a lot of the 49er fans get it messed up with turnovers and what happens. The reason the turnovers don't happen sometimes is because those guys are in positions where turnovers can't happen. The ball don't go to them. But do you understand that Tartt, Ward, they stop things from happening? And if it's a 3-yard gain, if you watch the tape, there's a guy that possibly could have been running wide open that was taken away and erased. And those things aren't stats. There's no stat for that. So again, don't cite turnovers when you talk about how to evaluate these players. Please don't, because that's the worst way that you can evaluate those things, right?
It's the easiest way too, though. Like we look at the turnover numbers and we think defensive backs are supposed to be these ball hawk type guys, where realistically, like a lot of what they do well is, as I said earlier, you see it on the tape more so than you see it in the stat line.
Yes, and that's the point, right? Is there's a lot more. There's so much more context, and shout out to Vish, nuance when you talk about how. Yeah, that's his word. But when you talk about how to evaluate players and you understand scheme, right? When a guy's single high and the ball doesn't go his way, how is he supposed to make interceptions on these things? It doesn't make any sense, right? So that's my thing. It's like, okay, if you're talking about a corner who's getting targeted a ton and he's not making any plays on the ball, fine. But they don't throw the ball at Jimmy Ward when he's out there. I know he talked about on Grant's show about, I don't understand why the Rams keep trying me. Well, I kind of had to look at that myself, right? Because in 2019, Jimmy Ward in the first Rams game, if you guys remember, there was a sequence of a third down where he covered Joe Everett, knocked the pass down. Next play has to cover Cooper Kupp, who is no easy cover. No. That's a slot receiver. And literally knocks that play out and ends that drive. What safety do you know? Because Jamal Adams can't do it. What safety do you know that can cover a tight end, then go cover one of the better slot corners in the league? There's no safety that can do that for you. And, Bootmaker tried to cover George Kittle. That doesn't work. The Cardinals keep drafting guys that can try to cover George Kittle. That's not working. I think it's time that, and it's happening little by little, put some more respect on Jimmy Ward and Tartt's name, honestly, at this point. And the Tartt game that I'm going to point to in 2020 was that Philly game, man. He was incredible in that game. Unfortunately, he got injured at the end of that game. And, I know that people like to make fun of Dante Johnson, but Dante Johnson gave up a touchdown to Travis Fulgham on Carson Wentz's best pass in his career. He'll never be able to throw a better pass than that. He tore his groin on the play, still had great coverage. The ball literally landed like a pillow right into this man's hand. Like if he was in a hot air balloon and Carson Wentz dropped the ball, he wouldn't be able to drop it closer than he threw it. So there's a lot of things that you guys need to consider other than turnovers and the way that the guys impact games. And what I expect from Jaquiski Tartt this year is a lot more blitzing, like you saw in 2017, a lot more playing at the line, and a lot more disrupting things. Now, the only issue with Tartt right now, because Ward seems to have gotten over it. Unfortunately, Ward lost the game last year because, he had a concussion in the Dallas game, but that was it. It was nothing more than that. He actually came right back. With Tartt, it's just the injuries. That's it. That's why I say if Tartt can play 16, 17 games, he has a real legitimate shot at a Pro Bowl this year. I really believe that. And I really believe that we have the best duo in this league.
Like, I don't know how to word this take necessarily. I think a lot of why Ward and Tart don't get talked about like they should is because they play for the 49ers. And that's not like a slight at the Niners. It's when you think of historically great, because like we do this thing where we see the Ravens, we just assume they have a good defense. We see the Seahawks, we assume they have a good defense. Whether or not that's true, it's because we think of these. See, the same with the Steelers, right? If Tart and Ward played for the Ravens, they would be talked about because the Ravens, they know defense. Ray Lewis, all these Terrell Suggs, Ed Reed, all these guys, they know defense. You move them up north, God forbid, we move them up to Seattle. We're talking about Legion of Boom Point 2.0. This is the new era of they're not the hardest of hitters, but they cover great. They play great. But they play for the 49ers, and the 49ers have never been known as a defense. They have recognizable defensive teams, right? Like the Harbaugh defenses, and obviously, the Walsh defenses were pretty good. But like the Niners aren't one of those teams where like you think all-time great defenses. You think the Bears, you think the Steelers, you think the Ravens, now the Seahawks because of what they've done the past decade. But I to me, man, I don't know how you have a safety duo ranked higher than Ward and Tart if fully healthy.
No, and go into your fun facts with Jimmy Ward and Tart because I think they're great.
So is this just me telling you guys that I didn't really look at the fun facts until about 10 minutes before the podcast? Fun fact for Jimmy Ward, he played high school football with Jaquiski Tart. Fun fact about Jaquiski Tart, he played high school football with Jimmy Ward. That's my fun facts for the two. We actually discovered a new one with Jimmy Ward, with Tart, because we kind of talked about it with Jaquiski Tart when we had him on the show about his basketball past and how he thought he was very good at basketball. He didn't go as far as Jimmy Ward. What Jimmy Ward said on Grant Cohn's show, Ward said on Cohn's show, he would be an all-star NBA player at this point. So that's very high praise for a guy who told us like, I was really good in high school and wouldn't go that much further into it. So there you go. Jaquiski Tart.
The best part about our Tart interview was that when you brought that portion out, right? Mm-hmm. Like when we talked about basketball, his eyes lit up and he almost in the beginning, he was kind of going with the punches about, hey, this is, I agreed to come on here. I'll do the interview. Mm-hmm. But when you started talking ball, his eyes opened up and he loosened up a little bit more. So that goes to show you that man, you talk crazy about an NFL player. He could have chose the NBA just as easily. And imagine being able to say, you know what? I don't feel like playing in the NBA. I feel like being a safety in the NFL. Yeah. Crazy, right? Crazy. Yeah.
I wish I had those choices.
Right. I was going to say my decision in the morning is like, am I going to have Honey Nut Cheerios or Cinnamon Toast Crunch? And those are hard decisions because you can't, at my age, continue to eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch every single day because it's not good for you. So imagine being able to say, hey, I could be an NBA player or I could be an NFL player. I don't have those options. Not many of us do.
No, none of us do. I mean, really, Shohei Ohtani gets to choose between hitter and pitcher, and that's really the only other choice you can compare that to. Mm-hmm. So we've touched on the starters. We know about the starters, man. Now the issue, as I said at the start of the show, the depth, the secondary behind them. They drafted a few guys. You mentioned Thomas, Diamador Lenore. They signed Tony Jefferson, which a lot of people were excited about. What's your thought on the depth of the secondary, Jason?
Well, with Jefferson, that's really honestly, that's a feather in your cap now when you consider that, unfortunately, Tarvarius Moore is not going to be here because I was excited for him. Tarvarius Moore had all the skills, everything athletically to get it done. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the mind that works better in this game because sometimes he lets things go over his head, behind him, things like that. Okay, fine. I'm not here to, make fun of him or anything like that. But with Hufanga, with Thomas, with Lenore. So Lenore, when he was brought in, people immediately were looking at, okay, this is K1's replacement. Yeah. And K1 is 30 years old, which is like, hey, that's like a death sentence in most positions for players. But his market didn't develop the way that I thought, or he thought it would, right? And he decided to come back because, one, he knows how he'll be utilized. And two, 49ers pass is physical. Mm-hmm. The 49ers are good for passing physicals. They are, when other teams don't. I'm not here to speculate on what's going on, but from everything that we've gotten, the injury to his knee is a little bit bone on bone type stuff. Like he's like that, but that's fine. Players can play through that. And if you watched him at the end of the year, he played in the Arizona game. So he got carted off in the Arizona game, and everybody was like, "Oh my goodness!" He came back and then like recorded a sack after. What? So again, a guy's heart, it outreaches all that stuff. So K1 is the slot corner, but Lenoir was supposed to be the guy that did that. Now a video comes out of him clamping Austin Watkins on the outside, and
we don't talk about that video.
No. But you start to think, hey man, is he a little bit more than a slot receiver? Is he an outside receiver? It's an interesting thing. With Ambry Thomas, I get exactly what they're looking at, right? I had a chance to really deep dive into his film. He's the guy that I really looked at. He used to play wide receiver in high school. Caught a ton of touchdowns over there. Even Jim Harbaugh in Michigan utilized him on end arounds and tried to get the ball in space. He returns kicks. Those are good. When I watch him in coverage, I can see what the 49ers like about him. Tall, sticky, can kind of, make plays on the ball at times. Some negatives. I have to get into the negatives. I do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One of his best games that I actually was able to get like film on, he had a ton of panic penalties. And what do I mean by that? A guy's wide open, running past him. You just immediately grab him and you bring him down. And this was Michigan State he played. So this isn't him trying to cover Olave from Ohio State or Devontae Smith in a huge game.
Which in college, it's not the worst strategy, though, because PI is only 15 yards in college. But in the NFL, you cannot do that because you're going to give up the spot foul.
Right. And my problem is if it's Devontae Smith and you tackle him and you bring him down, cool, because Devontae Smith won the Heisman. Waddle's a stud. Jamar Chase is a stud. When I watched him against Michigan State, he struggled in that game, and it was his best game. He had an interception in that game, and he had a few pass breakups. But some of the things that I saw on that tape from that game were a little bit concerning when it talks about like, hey, when you get beat, you're just literally grabbing guys and trying to bring them down. Look, I understand exactly what the 49ers are looking at, and I think that it was a great pick because the 49ers have not drafted for that position, and I get exactly what they're going for, but there are concerns. You have to look at this objectively, and that's really what I did. What I can see is that if he gets an interception and he is moving with the ball in his hands, then he is good money because he understands how to break long runs. He's run back touchdowns and things like that. I just get nervous about sometimes when those plays break down. And if you're doing that against a Michigan State receiver who probably has a job somewhere now, never even made the league or anything like that, I get nervous about, what's going to happen when you face the bigger. I like his confidence. I love the bravado. He talked about in his press conference, like, I'm not worried about my contract. I'll get paid what I'm owed because of my skill set. Good. Perfect. You said the right thing. But I would be lying to everybody here if I didn't say that when I watched that game, I didn't walk away with some concerns.
Yeah, and him with him coming out of Michigan too, right? Like,
yes,
he's got a mindset because we know that coach's mindset fairly well out here in San Francisco, Bay Area. We know that coach's
not
mindset.
Not that many people have it better than us.
Not too many that the Seahawks did, but that's okay. We won't talk about
Ravens did.
Ravens did too. But we don't talk about Ohio State. Ohio State does too. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I don't know why.
Me either.
Yeah. So like obviously the Niners drafted him for a reason. Even with the things we saw, man. Like it's going to be a really interesting season for the secondary. Like that's just what it is. Obviously, the best hope is they just stay healthy. And they ball out and they show what they can be. Obviously, it's the NFL. You can't really sit there and hope on health. But with the secondary, there's a lot of Pandora boxes. You don't know what's going to be there when you open it. And hopefully we don't have to find out too much because, like, Lenoir will be fine in moderation, at least for now. He's a rookie. That's just kind of what same with Ambry Thomas. He's a rookie. We don't know what he is yet. We don't want to find out too quick because if we find out too quick, obviously it can be good, it can be bad, it can be in between. It's just we know how good the starting secondary can be.
Yes.
Let's not find out what's behind it yet. Not yet, at least.
And in the same way, and I hate to bring it back to the quarterback thing, in the same way that many people are like, hey, it would be nice if Jimmy sat there. I mean, if Trey sat there for a little while Jimmy played well. A best case scenario for the secondary is that everybody stays healthy and those guys get a year to learn.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's not a bad thing.
No.
Any final thoughts you have on the secondary before we wrap it up?
This up? No, Hufanga is really interesting because Hufanga could take snaps at will linebacker. And, I think that the way that you look, there's no free safety and strong safety spot on this roster, right? Like this, I hate the people that are like, oh, well, Jimmy Ward will impact this guy's. No. They play however they play. Positionless football is on both sides of the ball. And I think that the 49ers have embraced that. And Hufanga could take snaps at will linebacker while being a safety. It's not about where they're positioned on the field. It's about their responsibilities. And I think that I really like that pick as well, too. It's really just a matter of, hey, man, what do I know? I know that Jason Verrett, if he puts together a full season, can be an all-pro. I know that Emmanuel Mosley is a solid second. I don't really know too much more after that from a cornerback position. And that's okay because we have a lot of time to figure these things out. There's a whole camp. There's preseason. And if the 49ers feel so inclined, there are options out there for you to go get. And I really believe that the 49ers believe that this pass rush is going to at least somewhat approach what they did in 2019, which – if the pass rush gets there, you don't have to cover for so long. So those are my final thoughts. And also, Jimmy Ward and Tart are the best duo. I'm dying on this hill. I don't care.
We are dying on that hill because that's something we both agree on. So, Jason, I have come up with a very scientific way to decide this. I'm hoping this is going to work. Can you let that in on the show? It's backstage. Backstage. Oh, there we go. Jason, what are we going to talk about next week, buddy?
Let's do it.
Oh, man. What position are we talking about next week?
The wheel spinning. Please do not get to the one. Yes.
We're going to talk about linebackers next week. That'll be our show. That'll be our preview. Woo! Oh, man, that's fun. That can be pretty cool.
That is fun.
So we're going to talk linebackers next week. So Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, all the gang. Jason Aponte, as always.
Let's go Niners.
What you say, she's